business called Phenomenadoodle, and I do WordPress design and development specifically for small businesses. I'm also a member of the WordPress theme review team, who are the folks who review all the themes submitted to the WordPress repository to make sure that they're up to scratch before they're released to the masses. And that's really what I wanted to chat to you about today, was the theme review process, but specifically how knowing about that process can benefit you even if you never intend to submit a theme to the WordPress directory, ever. Just a quick check, has anybody ever submitted a theme for inclusion in the WordPress repository? Does anybody intend to ever? What? Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
That's my first small hand.
So I missed hands as well. I thought I saw some go up for intend to. Okay. Right. But for the rest of you folks, if you're a designer or a developer, I'm guessing that you're doing custom theme design in the sense that you're designing for one particular client, right? One particular business. And if you're doing that, you're either developing something from scratch, or you're using a premium theme maybe that you've bought from WooThemes or ThemeForest, for example, and then customizing that for the client. Regardless of which way you do it, it's really great to develop your themes against the theme review guidelines. If it's your own theme, it really helps you bring your code up to scratch in terms of quality and security. But also, if you're buying a premium theme, a lot of them aren't necessarily reviewed before they're put out there. Some theme shops are better than others at reviewing themes before they put them out, but others don't at all, so they're relying on the individual theme developer to make sure that everything's of a good quality. So if you've bought a premium theme and you know the theme review guidelines, do your own theme review on that before you release it to the client, just to make sure that everything is up to standard. Just a little bit about the WordPress theme review team, or WPTRT. It was formed in June 2010, so it hasn't been around that long, just over a year and about 3 months. And it was formed with the purpose of bringing some quality control to the theme repository. Martin was saying earlier on, the theme review team now exists. Plugins, unfortunately, don't have the same kind of review team, not yet, at least. And the theme review guidelines look at a variety of things. There's quite a range of things that get checked, from code quality to making sure that the WordPress functionality is incorporated correctly, theme security, licensing, the naming of the theme, credit links, which unfortunately many times are quite often spammy, so we check for that, and then the theme documentation as well. It's a group of volunteers, and anybody can join. So if you are a theme designer or developer and you're interested in getting involved, please do. We're always looking for more people to stop the theme queue building up too much. And yeah, come and speak to me afterwards or ask a question at the end if you just want a few more details about the theme review team itself and what is involved in that. To start off with, I wanted to talk to you about the environment in which you ideally should be developing your themes. It's the environment in which we test themes, but obviously if you're developing a theme, part of that development is testing it to make sure it's working correctly. So having these things in place is really good right from the start of looking at it. Some plugins that you should think about installing if you don't have them installed already. Log deprecated notices will tell you if you're using any deprecated functions or out-of-date functions in your code. A lot of people, when they develop a theme, if they are doing something from scratch, will find a tutorial on the web and copy and paste into their theme files. And a lot of the tutorials out there are great, but there are a few of them that are now out of date as well. So not only in terms of deprecated stuff, but WordPress has introduced a lot more functionality over the last 2 years. So if you're using a theme tutorial from 2009, you're probably using something that's out of date in there. Debugger, which is a name I absolutely love, is a debugging plugin. A debugging plugin. It it will tell you if there are any errors in your PHP code. It can also, if you're developing on a live site, tell you if your HTML and CSS are valid as well. Theme check is another great one. It's absolutely brilliant to have in your toolbox when you're developing a theme. When themes are uploaded to the WordPress repository for initial review, the theme check plugin actually runs automatically. It basically checks all the theme review criteria that can be done in an automated way before the theme even gets to a manual check by a real live reviewer. And if a theme fails the theme check on upload, we never see it as theme reviewers. But it's great if you're developing a theme for a client to run this, because it will tell you any errors you've made, any serious errors, any warnings you need to take into account. It will even give you recommendations as well about things you should be doing or better ways to do something. And it will also provide information on things you need to take into account if you've introduced particular functionality into a theme. It'll say, oh, just remember you need to include this. That's not in your theme at the moment. So really fantastic one to have. The next thing is to go into your WP config file and scroll down to the bottom and find WP debug. It's just above the line that says, that's it, stop editing now, happy blogging. And it's set by default to false. Just change the word false to true, and then what happens if you make an error in your theme code is it will print out all these nasty notices on your screen and give you an incentive to get rid of all of that stuff really quickly by finding out what's wrong and fixing it. And then lastly, I'd highly recommend that you download and import the theme unit test data. I've got a resource slide at the end where the link to where you can find that is included. Really, the theme unit test data is a standard WordPress import file, and it consists of a series of blog posts and pages that contain pretty much every type of content you could possibly imagine somebody adding into a WordPress theme, and sort of every configuration of that content as well. Obviously, if you're developing a theme for public release in the repository, you don't know how your end users are going to use that theme, so having the theme unit test data as a check really gives you peace of mind that your theme is quite robust to handle anything. But I don't think it's any less necessary if you're developing for one client. I mean, the odds are you're going to know, ideally you should know what the content of a site is going to be when you're developing it for a business. But WordPress being WordPress, part of the point of WordPress is that clients can add their own content to a blog. They can edit pages if they're using WordPress as a content management system. And you don't know a few months down the line what a client is going to do. They may upload a really huge image instead of something that fits in. And if you've run the theme unit test data on your theme before releasing it, you can be pretty sure that something like that isn't going to break the layout or design of your site down the line. I don't have time to go through all the different criteria. There's quite a long list of them. Again, there's a link at the end where you can read through all of them if you're interested. I just thought I'd pick out a few of them to give you an idea of the types of things we look at and to highlight some of the things that, if you're designing and developing a theme, you should also be taking into account. Not all the theme review criteria would be applicable if you're doing a custom theme design for one client. But really, even though some of it won't be, the bulk of the theme review criteria, I think, are. And that's because at the end of the day, a WordPress theme is a WordPress theme. It needs to work with WordPress. Certain functionality has to be incorporated. It has to work in certain ways. And code quality is code quality. You need to be checking to make sure that things are done correctly. So one of the first criteria is to prefix any custom variables or any custom functions that you add to the theme in your theme functions file with a unique slug, a unique word. Usually recommended that you use the theme name. Just something unique at the front of that to stop your function name or your class name clashing with maybe a plugin developer's custom function name. You know, we all know the internet's going to blow up if you have my custom function and a plugin developer also has my custom function. But if both of you have prefixed your functions with different names, the likelihood of that is vastly reduced. Second thing is to get familiar with the support that WordPress provides for things like RSS feeds, for widgets, for comments. Those are required for themes in the public repository. But also things like nav menus, post thumbnails, being able to add a custom header or background. Sometimes we come across themes where people have tried to reinvent the wheel. They don't necessarily realize that it's quite easy to add theme support for these kinds of things, and they've done something creative to do their own thing. If you get familiar with the way that WordPress does it, it's usually, in some cases, one line of code or just a few lines of code to add to the theme. A, you're saving yourself a lot of work, and B, you're also tapping into the WordPress ecosystem, so you're making sure that your theme is as bulletproof as possible. And you're not introducing any security loopholes inadvertently by trying to do things in a different way. Again, have a look at the various template tags that are available and the different action hooks and filters that are out there that allow you to do different things. Two that I wanted to mention, there are a whole lot more template tags than this, but two particularly that sometimes cause an issue are WP head and WP footer. WP head sits in the head of the theme, WP footer in the footer, and essentially they're what plugins need in order to work. Plugins hook into those in order to run their code and add their code to your theme. So if you're ever troubleshooting, if you ever find a plugin just won't work at all with your theme, start by having a look to see that those are included. It's sometimes quite easy to forget to put them in, and they might be missing, and that might be the reason. A few more things. Well, on the subject of template tags, those of you that maybe aren't familiar with designing or developing WordPress themes might not realize that WordPress theme is made up of multiple files that all come together to make up the theme. Some of the standard ones are, well, these standard ones are header.php, footer.php, sidebar, comments. Often people will include those into their main index file by using PHP imports or some other kind of code to bring them in. But again, they're standard template tags for that, and they're really easy to use and should be used. So get header, get footer, get sidebar, and comments template for the comments. Really quick and easy one line of code to bring them in. If you have any custom files that you want to incorporate, for example, if you've got different layout for content on, which you might often do for pages, for posts, even maybe a specific page is a very different layout, for example. You can separate out your loop, say, from the rest of the index file or the page.php file, and put that into its own template file. And you would then call it using get template part. And in the brackets at the end, you'd then say what you want to call the loop, and specifically loop for the index or loop for page or loop for a specific page name as well. So that's an absolutely great thing to be able to use. A nice implementation of it that I saw the other day as well, which I hadn't realized that 2011 does, is they separate out the post formats that WordPress introduced fairly recently into separate template files. So they have different files for the layout of things like status updates and galleries and audio posts and video posts, and they call those using their template part. If your theme relies on JavaScript for anything, a common thing to do is to hard code that into the head of the theme files. It's better to use WP and Q scripts to do that. Again, it's a function that you can use, or an action hook that you can use to do that. And the reason why you'd want to do that instead of hard coding it in is that in queuing the script first, make sure that WordPress only loads it once. WordPress comes bundled with a whole lot of scripts like jQuery and Scriptaculous, so you don't need to have your theme load that separately. All you need to do is enqueue that script, and then it's available to your theme to use. But if you're using any custom JavaScript as well, or you're calling any scripts from elsewhere that are hosted elsewhere, you can use the same function to do that. And then lastly, WordPress generates some CSS classes when it runs. Some of them, or many of them, relate to images, for example, and galleries. So things for captions on images, the caption text, the gallery text, alignment, align left, align center. Your CSS file should be taking those into account. You may not start off with needing caption text, for example, in the images you have on a client's website, but all you need is for a client to go, oh, I can add a caption to this. They do. If you haven't taken the fact that WordPress generates those classes into account when you do your theme in the CSS file, it's going to look a bit strange on the front end. So just make sure you know what the generated classes are and have support for that in your CSS file. Right, those are some resources. If you are interested in the theme review guidelines, they're on a codex at codex.wordpress.org/theme review. They're kept pretty much up to date. I know parts of the codex aren't often updated as much as we would like, but the theme review guidelines are kept pretty much up to date, and they're currently being revised as well in anticipation of WordPress 3.3. So that's something to just dip into every now and again and have a look. Theme development will take you through the process of doing a theme from scratch, the theme unit test data, and lastly the theme review team website itself if you're interested to see what's being talked about and what's being done, or you want to request some themes to review. I'll leave that up there. The slides will be available, so you don't necessarily need to copy those down, but I'll leave that up there and take any questions.
So you put up some plugins before that will be good to run when you're developing a theme. Do you think they should be used if you're kind of commissioning a theme as well? If you're saying to someone, build us something, should you then go and use that as quality control for yourself?
So if you're the client...
If I'm doing something like that, I mean the log deprecating notices and setting debug to true and things like that, would that be a good thing?
If it's a client, if you're a client that has a bit of knowledge and you want to make sure that the theme that you've commissioned is working correctly, then by all means, go ahead and install that. If many clients aren't necessarily that technologically oriented that they would know what it all means, they might be horrified to see any notices coming up, which might be a good thing. They shouldn't be. It's a requirement for theme review that there are absolutely no errors at all generated by the theme.
That would be quite interesting for us when we get stuff delivered externally, is that say that as part of our contract, part of the, it must comply with the theme review guidelines.
Yeah.
Martin, you probably agree with that?
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
Gives you an external standard to be able to look at.
Quite used to have a little bit of wording for that, so that it feels easy for us to kind of pick that up and pass it on. Obviously shorthand of what you're saying there. You will agree to these. I mean, I guess getting that tested. You've got competency difficulty there, but at least if it's signed it off, you're going to go into or then sweet.
The new functions about uploading the background image and the ability to upload a player image.
Yeah.
What's the recommendations of those and the opinion of those functions to the review team? Are they in some respects required for new themes just because they've been made available, or does it really matter?
No, not necessarily. Custom backgrounds and custom headers are recommended that themes incorporate that functionality, but it's not required. If themes incorporate that functionality, then it is required that they do so in the correct way. So yeah, that then becomes a requirement. But no, it's completely optional. There's quite a bit in the theme review guidelines that I didn't go into around theme options panels. Because when you're developing a custom theme for a client, you don't necessarily have as many options in the WordPress admin area as you would for public release. It's a good thing. I think it makes it easier for people to do that. My own personal opinion around those kind of things is that sometimes themes add in too many options, which confuses the end user sometimes because there's just so much stuff that they can change. But if they keep it simple and they do it correctly, then
A little bit ignorant about the background of something that I've never implemented, but if you use a theme like 2011, for example, as it enabled, and you upload an image and then switch to another theme that's not enabled, does it remember the setting from the theme? Not at the moment, right?
It should do, but it doesn't.
So that'd be alright if,
yeah.
if it was a recommendation, then you weren't playing around changing things, you could keep back, go back to what you that you probably do.
Yeah.
And then that's all.
Yeah.
I think the problem comes when, particularly, the same issue happens with header files as well. Header images, you upload a header image for 2010, and then switch to 2011, it hasn't got a header image. But the problem comes because it might require widths and heights and so on. So it almost sometimes feels like you don't want the same one to suddenly apply to this new theme, which requires a different size. So it's a bit of swings and roundabouts, but yeah, at the moment it doesn't remember the even though it's a core WordPress functionality.
The child themes.
Yes, yeah.
The other thing to note on that, Kim, is that it returns a URL rather than a path. So if you want to process it through Tin Thumb or an equivalent to make it stretch or color, you actually have to make 2 calls to your website in order to do it. It's a lot of fun.
Just one thing worth mentioning, particularly if somebody's kind of starting from scratch in theme development, is to look at 2011, which is explicitly written to be an exemplar WordPress theme, so it uses all of the up-to-date WordPress functionality. It uses, as you mentioned, the correct way to include template themes and everything. So it's a really good starting point, really good learning tool to have a look at it. It's full of comments that tells you what it's doing. So yeah, 2011 theme is a really good example of starting up. And it's also a good basis for a child theme. So once you get into the concept of child themes, where you're just modifying an existing theme in certain ways, it's a really good starting point because it's got lots of hooks and functions in there that you can use.
Yeah, those comments in 2011 are fantastic. They're pretty much a textbook in WordPress theme development in themselves, and it's absolutely free and comes with your WordPress installations. So,
Can I just ask, well, I mean, there's a slight deviation from this, but just because you mentioned the child themes in 2011, it's something that I've kind of looked at a little bit, but I'm not sure I fully understand. I guess I understand the reasoning for it as being having something at the core that doesn't change, but I've found it myself slightly confusing to work with child themes. I don't know if it's just my lack of understanding, but I wondered if you could just maybe tell me a little bit more about the reasoning. Well, I don't know just about them, a little bit of it.
a child theme just really separates out the customizations that you've made from the original theme files. And the main benefit of that is then when the theme developer, whichever theme you've used, goes ahead and makes an update to that theme. If you run that update, it doesn't overwrite any customizations that you've made or delete them. That's something that happens with the default themes. A lot of people, for example, would customize 2010 and update WordPress, which then updated 2010 at the same time, and their entire theme would just disappear.
So
So yeah.
Would you suggest it is best for when the customization that you're doing is at a relatively low level? Because the example I've seen was something that was set up by somebody else where the child theme seemed so wildly different from the original theme that it felt like you were putting all this here and then almost rewriting it all over again, and it just sort of felt like a lot of work to me rather than having one entirely new theme, which I don't know if that's a misinterpretation of mine or not. But
Yeah, I've only used child themes really for sort of smaller levels of customization where it does make sense to have the main theme sit there and get updated and just pull in a few custom changes that are required. I think if you're going to customize a theme so drastically that it looks completely different from the original, you could probably consider forking the original one, just creating a completely new one. Then the onus on you is to keep that theme updated, I guess. But if it is so different from the original anyway, when the original is updated and you've changed it so much, it may not really make a difference. So I guess it depends on the level, like you said, of customization you're doing. Yeah.
You mentioned using a custom slug for functions.
Yeah.
On the screen there was also classes. Did you mean CSS classes?
Oh no,
No.
If you're using sort of an object-oriented type
okay.
approach, I'm using classes and all.
And my second question, in queuing scripts,
Yeah.
in the theme review process, do you have to do that in the head? Or
No,
could you do it at the foot?
the enqueuing, you can do it either way. I mean, the actual code for WP enqueue scripts happens in your functions file, but within the arguments that function will take, you can say whether you want it to appear in the footer or not.
Right,
One of the arguments is in footer, and it's set by default to false, I think, so it will enqueue the scripts in the head.
But you
But if
can
you want it
put it
to
in
be
the
put in the
footer,
footer,
right.
then you just make that true. Okay, time's up.
Yes. Next.
Couple of things to get through. Got a very generous offer from Lee Willis, who was quite disappointed that he couldn't make it today. We've got 40% off his commercial plugins on his website for anyone who's here today. So say thank you privately to Lee if you want. Some good stuff on there. Feel free to use it. We're going to have our panel discussion next. There's 5 minutes just now. Might have to make it a little bit longer break. Let's check if Donica from WordSkills here. In that case, we've got 25 minutes slot to fill after the panel discussion. So if anyone's feeling generous.
I was planning to be here.
Yeah.
Maybe he'll arrive in time for his presentation.
Hopefully. Well, yeah, 5-10 minutes max just now. We'll get set up. Put together.
Sorry, I did a bit. That's it. Really interesting. Have a wee master grant like I'm looking for things to you.
No, really, all the things that are in the scriptures will have been through that process. And some of the earlier ones prior to June 2010 won't be, unless they've been updated since then, and then they've been subject to. So if anything in the repository was developed before June 2010 and hasn't been updated since, then yeah, it hasn't been reviewed anything after. So, yeah, they have to be uploaded. Now it goes through to get
So if you wanted to review your website, you could I have been.
yeah, if you're a developer, I suppose, and you're not, your theme's not in the repository.
But you have to put it in the repository. So obviously just advertising to say a coffee staff. Place the boards and so that's what you're doing.
I still want to be business people. So we have tweeted over in Livingston. So flooring company. No, that's what got the whole get your attention. So how is it that